was hard for me to understand. And, you know, at that time when I was really paying attention to that, and I was an older teen, and we started seeing people like Don D. White having shows and success, all these artists, I didn't really understand it. You know, I thought a bit, or me, and we were a bunch of knucklehead kids at the time. All we cared about were the trains. If it wasn't the trains, like, we thought walls were silly. We thought painting on the streets were silly. We thought the trains were where it's at, because the trains would get your name around, you know, and the trains were where we felt there was a very strong history, and we wanted to participate in that history. And we felt that people that were leaving the train movement to go on to be commercial artists were sellouts, that they had totally sold their soul for money, and that this movement wasn't about doing that. It was about painting on the trains and sharing in this camaraderie that you could only get if you participate in the train movement. And so we got into arguments with those guys. We got into fights with those guys sometimes, because we were totally against the commercialization of the art form. But we were still kids, so we were, you know, not that responsible. We were still in this mindset of stealing paint to paint. You know, we were in the mindset of stealing everything if we had to avoid work. So, you know, living the outlaw sort of squatter kind of existence, versus these other artists that understood the dynamics of capitalism, and that, you know, things cost money and they needed to make a living, and they actually understood the world beyond New York City, and the opportunities that were coming their way, and they started to navigate it. So it was challenging at first. And, you know, we would encounter these guys in some of these spaces, and sometimes there would be arguments. Sometimes we'd convince them to come and paint trains with us again, and sort of do one last hurrah, you know. So we were trying to convince them to, like, come and hang out and do the things that we grew up seeing them do. And so many of them did, or some of them did, and so that was great. But eventually, we all sort of fell into this time and this movement where we're all adults now, and everybody's trying to make a living. And will this art form provide a living for the artists that were painting trains? Many artists quit after they stopped painting trains, and retired from art altogether. Hundreds, thousands of them just retired once the trains got cleaned off. There were a few diehards like myself that continued, and then there were a few that sort of saw what the generation before us did and decided to go that route. And today it's artists like Todd James that have become very successful. That was one of us painting trains, but then went into the art world and has shows all over the world, and it's successful, and it's great to see. And, you know, he gets a lot of respect because he actually was truly from this movement. Because what's happened since then is now artists paint graffiti style paintings, but they never painted in the streets. They never painted on trains. And so that's even a bigger divide than leaving the trains to go to the gallery. So a lot has changed in the past 40 years as far as this art movement goes with everybody, you know, since it's gone global.